The words still echo in my head. You are not part of this family anymore. Get lost, and never show us your face again. Then the door slammed and the lock turned. I stood on the porch holding the key like an idiot. My own house, gone in a second. My father's voice so final made my chest go hollow. My mom didn't even look at me. She just turned her back and slid the curtains shut. The night was cold, but not colder than the silence inside that door. I pressed the useless key against my palm until it cut a mark, like proof that it had all been real. I had nothing on me but my backpack and the beat-up car parked at the curb. I thought about ringing the bell again. Maybe they'd open. Maybe it was just another one of their twisted ways to scare me into doing what they wanted. But no, this time felt different. I could hear the muffled sound of the TV inside. They were carrying on like I had never existed. So I walked. Past the mailbox, past the driveway I used to shovel snow from, past the basketball hoop where I shot free throws as a kid. Each step felt like a cut. By the time I reached the car, I wasn't even breathing right. I drove aimlessly that night, headlights carving through empty streets. I parked behind the old diner near Maine, the one that never closed. I sat there for hours, scrolling through old texts from them back when I still mattered. Back when I was still their son. 1 week later, my phone buzzed at 6:42 a.m. A number I didn't recognize. I rubbed my eyes, still half asleep, and opened it. The message was short, urgent, written like a command. We have a problem. Call immediately. It was from their lawyer. I stared at it, my hands trembling. A week ago I wasn't family. A week ago they erased me. And now, suddenly, I mattered again? That was the first moment I realized something bigger was happening. Something they didn't want me to know but couldn't handle without me. Do you know how it feels to be disowned 1 week and begged for help the next? I didn't call right away. I let the text sit there, burning a hole in my pocket. If they wanted me gone, then gone was what I'd be. But curiosity doesn't just vanish. It gnaws at you. By noon, I caved and dialed the number. A clipped voice answered. This is Attorney Henson. I cleared my throat. You texted me. What's going on? He hesitated. Your parents, they're in a complicated situation. I'd prefer to discuss this in person. Can you come to my office today? I almost laughed. A week ago they were done with me and now their lawyer wanted me face to face. Why me? I asked. Another pause. Because, legally, you're still tied to certain agreements. They can't move forward without your signature. That word, signature, stuck in my head. My parents had always been careful with papers. Everything signed, notarized, filed. The fact that they couldn't just erase me with the stroke of a pen made me smirk. I told him I'd think about it. Hung up. Drove straight to his office anyway. Downtown was buzzing. People in suits rushing across crosswalks, holding coffee cups like weapons. I walked into Henson's glass building, my sneakers squeaking against polished floors. The receptionist looked me up and down, clearly wondering if I was lost. Inside his office, Henson gestured to a chair. Stacks of binders covered his desk, but one thick folder sat on top. My last name printed in bold across it. He opened it slowly, sliding a document toward me. Your parents are restructuring ownership of certain assets. Real estate, businesses. To proceed, we need you to relinquish your rights. I frowned. What rights? Henson adjusted his tie. Technically, you're listed as co-owner on a property they transferred years ago. A cabin in Montana. You were a minor then, so your name went on for tax purposes. It's a loose end. They can't finalize until you sign it away. A cabin. My name. A detail they thought I'd never remember. I didn't even know it existed until that moment. I leaned back in the chair, heart pounding. They disowned me to my face, and now they wanted my signature to quietly erase me on paper too. I didn't touch the pen. I just asked calmly, what happens if I don't sign? Henson's jaw tightened, like he'd been waiting for that question. He slid his glasses up the bridge of his nose. Then your parents can't move forward with the transfer. Everything stalls. The buyer walks. They lose a considerable sum. I tapped the folder with one finger. How much? He cleared his throat. North of $2.5 million. The number hung in the air like smoke. I pictured my dad's smug face, my mom's cold stare at the locked door. They had thrown me out like trash, and now, suddenly, I was worth $2.5 million to them. I leaned forward. And the cabin? What's it actually worth? Henson hesitated, then flipped to a page deep in the folder. He angled it slightly away like he didn't want me seeing too much. But I caught a glimpse. Appraisal documents, photographs. A lakefront property, tucked between evergreens and snow-capped ridges. His voice went flat. Officially, About $180,000. But I didn't buy it. The photos looked nothing like $180,000. The kind of land you couldn't put a price on. I kept my tone casual. So if I sign this, it's gone? My name disappears. Exactly, Henson said quickly. Clean and simple. I sat back in the chair. My pulse was racing, but I kept my face steady. I'll need time. He started to object, but I cut him off. You had me erased from my family in one night. You can wait a little for my answer. I stood, tucked my hands in my pockets, and walked out. His voice trailed behind me, "Don't take too long." But I didn't look back. By the time I reached the street, the city noise swallowed me whole. Cars honking, people shouting, the smell of food carts drifting in the air. But inside I was calm. Too calm. Because now I knew something my parents didn't realize I knew. There was a cabin with my name on it. A place they had hidden for years, buried under paperwork and signatures. And before I gave it up, I was going to see it with my own eyes. Ever wonder why the people who erase you suddenly panic when you start paying attention? 2 days later I was on the road. I packed the basics, duffel bag, old laptop, a couple of flannels, and filled my tank with the last of my savings. The GPS said 15 hours north. Montana. I'd never been, never even thought about it. But now it felt like the only place in the world that had my name on it. The highway stretched out forever, flat fields giving way to mountains. I drove through the night, stopping only for gas station coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. Every mile felt heavier but also sharper, like I was moving toward something that was mine, even if I didn't understand it yet. When I crossed into Montana, the air changed. Crisp, clean. Like you could breathe deeper here. Pines lined the road and rivers cut through valleys like silver. I pulled into a small town for groceries, and the clerk, a man in his 60s, gave me a curious glance when I asked for directions to the lake road. Not many outsiders head that way, he muttered, bagging my food. Cabins up there been in families for generations. I didn't correct him. I just nodded and drove on. The gravel road wound upward, tires crunching with each turn. And then I saw it. The cabin stood against the backdrop of a glacial lake, water so still it looked like glass. The roof sagged a little, the wood weathered, but it was solid. Real. My name was tied to this. I killed the engine and stepped out. The silence hit me first. No cars, no hum of city life, just wind through trees and the faint lap of water. I walked up the porch steps, boards groaning under my weight, and turned the knob. It creaked open. Inside, dust coated everything, shelves, chairs, even the stone fireplace. But there were signs someone had been here not long ago. A mug on the counter. A folded blanket on the couch. I set my bag down and just stood there. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt grounded. This place wasn't an accident. My parents hadn't told me because they never intended me to know. Now I couldn't stop thinking. What could they be so desperate to hide inside these walls? That night I couldn't sleep. The cabin creaked with every gust of wind, but it wasn't just the noise keeping me awake. It was the thought that someone had been here recently. The mug. The blanket. None of it matched the story Henson had given me, about some dusty, forgotten place worth only $180,000. I lit the old fireplace with matches I found in a drawer. As the flames grew, I noticed something strange. A strip of floorboard near the hearth sat higher than the rest. The wood looked newer, less worn. Curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed a pocket knife from my bag and pried the board up. Beneath it, a metal box. Heavy, locked, and coated in dust thick enough to choke on. I dragged it out, set it on the table, and just stared. My hands shook as I tried the lock. No luck. It would need tools. But just holding it told me enough. Something valuable was buried here. Something they didn't want me to find. The next morning, I drove into town and bought a cheap crowbar from the hardware store. The clerk gave me the same look as before, half curious, half suspicious, but didn't ask questions. Back at the cabin, I wedged the bar into the lock and forced it open. The lid groaned, then popped. Inside, stacks of folders. Old deeds. Contracts. Receipts. And tucked in the corner, a leather-bound ledger. I flipped it open. My dad's handwriting filled the pages. Dates, numbers, transactions. Some of them massive. Millions moving back and forth. Shell companies. Properties listed under different names. And there it was, my own name scrawled on documents tied to the cabin. Transactions made when I was a teenager, all under the guise of trust management. Except these weren't just minor tax tricks. These were cover-ups. Quiet transfers. Hidden assets. I sat back, my pulse racing. They hadn't just lied about the cabin. They'd been using my name as a shield. Running things through me because I was too young and too naive to notice. And now the lawyer's urgency made perfect sense. They weren't trying to clean up a small mess. They were trying to erase the one person who could expose the entire thing. I closed the box, locked it again, and slid it under the couch. Have you ever realized that the very people who erased you still needed your name to survive? I stayed at the cabin for 3 more days, reading through every folder in that box. The deeper I went, the clearer it became. My parents had built their fortune on shadows. Hidden transfers, fake valuations, family trust paperwork that wasn't really about trust at all. My name appeared again and again, tied to properties I'd never heard of. They hadn't erased me, they built me into the foundation. Quietly. Secretly. And now if I refused to sign, the whole thing could crack wide open. On the 4th morning, I drove into town for cell service and called Henson. I kept my voice calm. I've looked at the papers. I'm not ready to sign. Pause. Then, sharper than before, you don't understand. Time is critical. Your parents are under pressure. If you delay. I cut him off. Pressure isn't my problem. He exhaled hard through the phone. Listen to me. Walking away from this will not end well. Not for them. Not for you. The line went dead. I sat there in my car, watching townsfolk wander between the diner and post office, their lives simple, predictable. I thought about my own, tossed out of my home, left with nothing, told I wasn't family. And yet here I was, holding the one thing they couldn't buy or bully out of existence. My name on their secrets. That night, I pulled out the ledger again. One entry stood out, a payment just months ago marked against the cabin. Except it wasn't maintenance or tax. It was a transfer. 6 figures. I traced the routing information, half of it scribbled, half typed. Someone had been laundering money through this place. And they still were. The mug on the counter. The folded blanket. Whoever was using this cabin hadn't finished. They'd be back. My chest tightened, but not from fear. From clarity. I didn't need confrontation. I didn't need yelling or fists or revenge fantasies. All I needed was proof. Because in a world built on shadows, the one holding the light makes the rules. So I made a decision. I wasn't leaving this cabin. Not yet. Not until I saw with my own eyes who came back through that door. Ever realize the quietest plan you make might be the loudest thing they'll ever hear? The knock came at 11:47 p.m. 3 short raps, cautious but firm. I sat in the dark, heart steady, breath slow. Through the window, headlights flickered off. A black SUV sat at the edge of the gravel drive. I didn't move. Just listened. The knob turned and the door creaked open. A figure stepped inside carrying a briefcase. My father. He flicked on a lamp, muttering under his breath. Same suit, same arrogance. He walked straight to the couch, bent down and slid the metal box out. Except the box was empty. I had hidden the paper somewhere else. He opened it, confusion flashing across his face. He rifled through, then stood still, jaw tightening. He looked older than I remembered, the weight of years finally visible in his shoulders. That's when he pulled out his phone. It's gone, he whispered into the receiver. I don't know how, but it's gone. He listened. Nodded once. Yes. I'll handle it. I stepped forward, letting the floor creak. His head snapped up. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. You, he said flatly. I didn't raise my voice. You told me I wasn't family. But you kept using my name. He swallowed hard. You don't understand what's at stake. I shook my head. I understand more than you think. The silence stretched between us, heavier than any argument. Finally, he exhaled and put the phone away. What do you want? I didn't answer. I just watched him, letting him see that the balance had shifted. He wasn't in control anymore. After a long pause, he left. No threats. No promises. Just a quiet retreat into the dark. The SUV's engine roared to life, tires crunching away down the gravel road. I stood alone in the cabin, the ledger safe in its new hiding spot under the floorboards of the bedroom. My hands were steady. My breath even. They had come to erase me. Instead, I had erased their certainty. And for the first time, I knew exactly how this would end, not with anger but with exposure. Ever notice how silence can scare someone more than 1,000 words? The following week, I drove back into the city. Not to confront my parents, not to argue, but to deliver. I walked into a federal office with the box of documents and the ledger wrapped tight in my backpack. The clerk behind the counter barely looked at me as I slid the evidence across. Anonymous submission, I said. My voice didn't shake. He stamped it, logged it, and tucked it into a stack that looked like it could topple any second. To him it was just paperwork. To me it was the quietest earthquake I'd ever started. 2 weeks later the news broke. Investigations launched into shell companies, property transfers, offshore accounts. Words like fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion splashed across headlines. Reporters camped outside my parents' gated house, microphones thrust through iron bars. I didn't go near them. I didn't need to. Instead, I drove back to the cabin. The lake was still. The air sharper, colder. I stood on the porch, watching the water ripple in the wind. This place, once hidden, was now mine in every sense. No lawyer could take it. No signature could erase it. I sat at the old wooden table, ran my hand across the grooves in the wood, and let the silence fill me. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking about what I'd kept. My dignity, my name, my ground. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need them to beg. I didn't even need an apology. The world had finally seen who they were without me lifting a finger in anger. All I had done was refuse to disappear. And sometimes, refusing to disappear is the strongest answer you can give. I walked outside, closed the door gently, and looked at the mountains stretching wide and endless. This was enough.